Get started. My name is Jeff Anderson, and I am here today in Denver, in Colorado, standing with some very, very courageous survivors. And the reason we're standing together today and before you all is that there is just so much truth that needs to be revealed, and so many secrets that is still held. We know that recently the Attorney General released a master report revealing some information and identifying 42 offenders, Catholic clerical offenders in the state of Colorado. What we also know is that that revelation was far, far from complete in revealing the true peril. And the real peril, and in Colorado, is threefold. The first peril is the unrevealed peril of predator priests that have worked and abused across this state under the supervision of each of the bishops. 42 were revealed in that report released in October. Today, in the Anderson report, we released the names and the histories of 95 priests who have worked in the state of Colorado, in the 3 Catholic dioceses, each of whom have been publicly accused of childhood sexual abuse. 95 names in the Anderson report, all compiled from public data. There are 7 yet to be identified that are named but revealed in the AG report, whose names we have not yet discerned, that we know have been accused of and or committed the crime of child and sexual abuse in Colorado. That's 102 predators. Peril number 2, the practices and the perilous choices made by the Catholic bishops in Colorado, both present and past. For it is they that have made the conscious and reckless choice, present and past, to conceal and not fully reveal both the histories of the offenders under them and the files and histories known only to them. And they've also chosen to not reveal the complicity and the participation of the top officials in making the conscious choices they have. And that applies to every Catholic bishop in Colorado and every top official who've been complicit in those conscious and reckless choices, past and present. The third peril that we're here to address is the public policy. The public policy in Colorado, and in particular the statute of limitations, is so short that it has allowed and protected offenders. It has protected offenders, predators, and those that have chosen to protect them from being held accountable or being made to come clean or from being required to even report offenders. And it is that public policy in Colorado that has protected the wrong class of people. Instead of protecting kids and innocent children, is protected predators and those that have chosen to protect them, some of whom are the predators identified behind us, and also the Catholic bishops in Colorado. Childhood sexual abuse is not a crime specific to the Roman Catholic Church in Colorado. We all know that. But what we don't know and isn't fully revealed is the dangerous practices employed here in this state. Thus we assemble. The Anderson report that includes histories of over 100 of the clerical offenders that have been accused publicly of childhood sexual abuse is now the 26th report like this that we have released in various jurisdictions where we feel that there's been a gross underreporting of the perils that have existed, both past and present. We know that the release of this information is far from complete, and there's so many more stories to be told, so many more predators to be revealed, and so many more Catholic top officials that need to be identified as being complicit in these crimes. And I'll talk about those folks. I also stand with some survivors that have found the courage and the will and that need to be public and to identify themselves and to share a part of their story with us. And one of those offenders that has been widely known and who came onto my radar in the late 1990s, early 2000s, was Robert White, and I have two courageous survivors who are survivors of White, who had long been known to the Catholic bishops and who had long concealed that, and that is Carol Clear and Cate Stover. And if you'd like, Carol, I'd like you to step forward, introduce yourself, and tell us why you stand with us today.
I'm Carol Clear, and I was sexually abused and raped by Father White in Loveland. And I'm here today because they deceived me then, and I feel like they still are now.
Thank you, Carol.
And my name is Cate Stover, and I was sexually abused by Father White in Loveland. And I believe the church needs to stop hiding behind the secrecy, and they need to be honest with taking accountability.
And the year that you were abused as a child by White, how old were you?
I was age 10 to 13 approximately.
And that would have been approximately what years?
About 1966 to 1970.
It was 2 decades before that that White was first revealed as a serial offender to the Catholic bishops then, and they concealed that history and that knowledge. 4 decades, both before and during the time that White violated these 2 women, then vulnerable children, boys and girls. We've identified over 3 dozen victims, survivors of White, but we know that they know that there are many more. Another offender notoriously known and revealed to some extent by the AG report, Abercrombie, goes back also, and the pattern that is now known and revealed by White is the same pattern that has now been revealed to us. That is that Abercrombie was first known to the Catholic bishops in the late 40s and early 50s, and began a pattern of abuse of kids across the state and across the diocese. and violating families and kids. And John Murphy is here today with us as having been one of the survivors that stood up years ago. John, with whom we worked and who felt strongly about how he was treated back then. And so John, step forward and introduce yourself, please.
My name's John Patrick Michael Murphy. I'm a retired attorney from Colorado Springs. Myself and my two brothers, Marty and Eddie, went to Camp St. Malo back in the 1950s. And there, the chaplain was Leonard Abercrombie, the Reverend. We were his altar boys. He groomed us and soon molested my older brother, and then me, and then my younger brother. During that time, Urban Veer was the bishop. Abercrombie couldn't have done that if he was a real bishop tending to the people that he was in charge of. They deceived me, they deceived my brothers. My late brother Eddie was plagued by this his whole life. They stole his trust. Children need trust above all, some predictability in their life. That's what happened to him, and he has passed on. And my brother Marty and I feel strongly about what happened to us and the fact that the bishops didn't protect us. If these 8 men over here had done their job, there'd be very few faces back here. Each would have one victim instead of many. So I feel very strongly about it. I made a public outcry in 1993 with a letter, open letter to the Pope. And in that letter I said, I want to tell you what your bishops are not. The priests are molesting children, and the press dropped that. And the reason was the ponderous power of inertia called hegemony, the power of the Catholic Church and institutions like it. Held in too high of esteem to protect the children from them.
John Murphy, as you stand there and say these 8 men, you're not talking about Abercrombie, the man that was the child rapist that violated you and your family. You're talking about the Catholic bishops.
That's right.
That concealed and refused to reveal what they knew about Abercrombie, the serial offender. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
And the 8 men you're referring to here are the 8 men depicted on this board, who are the former archbishops and bishops who presided and made these reckless choices here in Colorado. Those are the 8 men you're talking about.
That's who I'm talking about. Not all of them individually to me, but all of them to some of the victims. Mine, of course, would be Veer, and then comes, they called him Suitcase Casey. He just moved everybody, don't unpack almost with him, because he didn't want you to be able to groom children, is what I believe happened, and that's why he moved priests so rapidly. At least he was doing something. He wasn't following the law, he wasn't following his conscience, but he was moving them like the rest.
Okay, thank you, John Murphy. Come on over here, Joe McGee. One of the things that, as both Carol and Cate reveal some of their story, and as John just revealed some of his and his family's story, all of them violated by trusted clerical figures, all of whom had a history known to the Catholic bishops before each of them were violated, and certainly after as well, all concealed. And then, when you came forward and revealed the truth, all deceived by the top officials, and not candid or honest or transparent about what they do. Is that right?
Correct.
And so Joe McGee, come on up here, will you? First, Joe McGee, at the age of 9 or 10, you were violated by a serial offender by the name of John Stein, correct?
Yes, but I didn't know he was a serial at that time.
You didn't know that. And so right there, hold up that's a photo of John Stein as a very young priest, around the time he would have violated you many years ago. Is that right?
He was a little older than that
All
at
right.
the time, but
And Joe McGee, at some point in time, long after you were violated, as a 9 and 10-year-old, and that picture is of you there, after that, you came forward just like Carol, just like Cate, just like John and his brothers, and to the diocese and to the Archdiocese, revealing what had been done to you. And what were you told, and how did they treat you? Tell us.
They treated me like I was a troublemaker, like I was just looking for money, and at that time I wasn't. That was not my motive then. I just lived with the guilt and shame for so long. All the things he did, and good things he did, like took me on a lot of trips and fed me alcohol, 10 years old. Well, you know, when John had his story in the Denver Post,
Rocky Mountain News.
Rocky Mountain News at that time, I did not know John at that time, but I said, I gotta find this guy. And I did. I found him. I looked until I found him. It didn't take very long either. But that's what motivated me to start talking. And John was the first guy I talked openly with. I tried to talk openly with my brother, who was also abused. He died 7 years ago. He never did talk openly. He wouldn't, because I guess it's a sin to say anything bad about a priest, even if it's true. And
Joe McGee, when you did come forward and brought that to then Archbishop Stafford in 1991, you began to deal with them for almost 5 years.
I have,
And there was a vicar general then who was right under Bishop Stafford by the name of Father Walker Nicholas, correct?
yes,
And Father Nicholas told you some things, and he told you, did he not, that they didn't know anything about this guy and they were blameless for what he had done to you, right?
right. And they told me, you know, if Jesus could suffer and die on the cross, I would think you could handle this.
Well, what we're here to tell the folks today, and what the history that we now are revealing about John Stein, the guy that violated him as a 9 and 10-year-old, who the Archbishop and his Vicar General, who is now, that is now the bishop in Sioux City, and has been the bishop in Sioux City, that is Walker Nicholas, told him they were blameless and they didn't know anything about this guy. The Archdiocese had known he had been convicted of felonious sexual assault of multiple children for 30 years prior to that. They had also known that he had been in prison for 18 months. They had also known that he had violated and raped multiple kids. There's a pattern here. And it's the reckless choices and the deceit and the deception being employed by the Catholic bishops in Colorado that brings us to this point in time where the truth needs to be revealed and children need to be protected, and safe harbor has to be stopped being given to those that offend, and those that choose to protect them need to be held accountable under the law. And the public policy of Colorado as it is, each of these folks were offered a small amount of money and required to take it because the law didn't allow them to do anything about it, nor did the law allow any of them to cause the records that we now know exist that reveal the long histories to be excavated and disclosed publicly. So they were allowed to get away with it back in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, into the present. So, Bridie, Farrell, you are a survivor, an advocate. What say you? about why we assembled here today.
Hi, my name is Bridie Farrell. I am a co-founder of an organization called New York Loves Kids, and after a meeting with the former chief executive officer of the United States Olympic Committee in Colorado Springs, where I told him that at 15 I was molested repeatedly by my then 33-year-old teammate, Olympic silver medalist, 4-time Olympian. When the CEO told me that I had to go back to my home state where the abuse occurred and that there was nothing the institution could or would do, I knew something was wrong. And in the state of New York, we work tirelessly to pass legislation that allows survivors to come forward and identify not only the abusers, but those that facilitated and allowed this abuse to continue, as in the 8 men just shown previously. I have a lot to say. First off, this idea of standing up and addressing the end of child sexual abuse in this country, make no mistake, it is not an attack on the Catholic Church. We are not anti-Catholic, we are anti-crime. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I also grew up in an ice rink. I started speed skating when I was 6 years old, and I competed for about 20 years. I was on the national team, all these things. I would put my kids in speed skating. It was the best thing in the world. There is a bad part of it, this individual and those that allow that abuse to continue, but we just need to address that and allow the community that does exist within these institutions, whether that's sports or religion or family. We're not saying wash them all out. We're saying open your eyes, folks. We knew about it. And don't tell me now that you didn't know about it, right? So Anderson Associates put out this brief, which lists people that were in your backyard, that were hurting your children. I mean, think about it. Our sons and daughters are still living with this. And so it comes a time where a place that is as progressive and as forward and as inclusive and as loving as Colorado is, to really embrace that and let the people of Colorado who have been abused to come forward and share their truth, and most importantly, to stop it from the next one happening. None of us are up here to be on a camera to talk about the worst days of our lives. None of us. But we are up here so that it doesn't happen to our kids, but also so it doesn't happen to your kids, your sons, your daughters, our nieces, our nephews. So I ask that people really unite around addressing this problem of child sexual abuse in the country and specifically here in Colorado.
Thank you, Bridie Farrell, and as a former athletic speed skater and competing nationally, and a survivor who advocated for public policy changes in New York. What have you seen happen in New York since New York and other states are following a removal of the statute of limitations or an opening it up from having been closed like it is in Colorado? What's happening right now?
Times are changing. Times are changing. I'm 37 years old and I should not be standing here today. With all due respect, this man started working on this project when I was born. Okay? These people that are standing behind me, they spoke out before I was abused. So finally, we're seeing laws across the country that are changing. Yeah, in New York, we've seen over 1,000 people come forward, adults, stand up and say what we have been told to be ashamed of, stand up and empower ourselves and say, enough is enough. It is time to come clean for us, and it is time to come clean for the people in our communities. We passed it in New York. We've passed legislation in New Jersey. We've passed legislation in California. We've passed legislation, meaningful legislation in Arizona. This isn't a bipartisan thing. It's not a red problem or a blue problem. Child sexual abuse, nor is it a pink problem or a green problem, a pink or blue, as in 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused and 1 in 6 boys. The Me Too movement changed our society. All these people coming forward, but the #KidsToo moment, where both women and men can come forward and talk about these problems, that's where we are. And I regret that I have to stand up here with my brothers and sisters that have been screaming this into the winds for so long, But finally, because of the tireless work that they did, because of that, we're up here and we're seeing a change. We're seeing monsters be taken down. We're seeing institutions clean themselves up. We're seeing safer pool decks and safer ice rinks. So it is a time where society is ready for this change, and now we just need the people that control the power to not be cowards and to do what they know in their heart is right.
Thank you, Bridie. It's time to expose the predators and reveal those that have chosen to protect them in schools and institutions and in the Roman Catholic Church across Colorado. In this report, we've identified there are 28 offenders publicly accused of childhood sexual abuse in the report where we don't know their whereabouts. We don't know where they are. They could be in your backyard, they could be in your school, they could be in your youth center, and they could be in ministry someplace else. We don't know because we can't find them. 28 that we can't find, that we know worked in Colorado who were publicly accused of childhood sexual abuse. In this report, we also know there are 54 priests who were diocesan priests. That means they were entered into the priesthood under the authority of the Catholic bishops. 54. In this report, we've identified that there were 40 religious order priests, that is, members of various religious orders, who are allowed to come into the state of Colorado, work and be appointed as a pastor, as a teacher, as a trusted priest, and work in Colorado who have been publicly accused. 40 members of religious orders. We also know, in tracking these folks and compiling this report, there are several of these religious order priests that now are still somewhere out there. And we have their locations. David Gottschalk, he's listed at Our Lady of Angels Friary in Denver, Colorado. He's a Capuchin. Philip Kraus, K-R-A-U-S, listed as a Jesuit and in the Community Corporation at St. Louis University. Richard Laus, L-A-U-S-E, Lazarus Residence in St. Louis, a Vincentian, a member of religious order. Paul Pilgram, P-I-L-G-R-A-M, listed a Jesuit at the Ignatius House in St. Louis. Anthony J. Short, another Jesuit, member of religious order at St. Louis University. We name them because there are 28 unknown, but these names are all names that come into our radar as having been publicly accused and still are in some place where they have not been publicly identified as we do this here today. We know the information we're releasing here today is far from what needs to be known, but we also know that it is on the courage of the survivors whose shoulders we stand in our exhortation for the truth and our exhortation for transparency and our exhortation for some measure of accountability in Colorado, because I've been working in this state trying to help survivors for 25 years. And every single time we'd bring a case forward, the Catholic bishops would hold up the statute of limitations as a shield and say, you can't do anything about it, and there's nothing you can do about it because we can hide behind it. And so they'd use the statute of limitations as a shield and as a sword, and as a result, we didn't get the Abercrombie file. And as a result, Joe McGee's offenders file has never been fully revealed the way we know it to be revealed today, Stein. And as a result, we knew that when Carol came forward and other white survivors came forward, 16 of which we worked with, they could hide behind the statute of limitations, and the case was going to be dismissed before we could do a full excavation. And as a result, there was a settlement made, but the settlement did not reveal the history that needed to be known. So we stand here today knowing that it's time. It's time for change, it's time for truth, it's time for transparency, and it's time for the law to change, to protect kids. So thank you to each of you. we'll take questions.
Does the Colorado statute of limitations protect both civil and criminal?
The statute of limitations in Colorado is very short as it pertains to both criminal and civil. The criminal statute of limitations can't be put back retroactively. The civil statute of limitations can. And what I mean by that is that if you pass a law, as they have in New Jersey, in New York, in California, in Minnesota, that allows survivors to bring a civil action against the offender and those that protected him or her, then you open up the opportunity for them to be revealed and exposed, which can lead to criminal prosecution. And that's what needs to happen in Colorado. Repeal and removal of the civil statute of limitations. There was a sincere effort made in 2009, I believe, and at that time Archbishop Chaput shut it down quite successfully, and he and other Catholic bishops have lobbied against reform in the state since then.
What is or are the statute of limitations in Colorado?
Well, it's a little complicated, but it's 4 years from the assault, and it can vary depending upon when it happened. But the bottom line is, it takes survivors of childhood sexual abuse to both report and process it as harmful and for what it is, decades. And in the absence of removal of the civil statute of limitations, survivors are not given a chance to not only have a voice, but to expose offenders.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I mean, research statistics show that survivors don't come forward until their 40s or 50s to report. So not only is a short statute of limitation insulting to us, it's also an ineffective policy and legislation. Personal example is the statute for me dissolved when I was age 23. I did not know that I was the victim of a crime until I was taking a course at Cornell University when I was 26 years old. So why didn't I come forward? I didn't know that I could or should have.
And Carol, Claire, you came forward at what age?
I don't remember the exact, it was mid-40s, late 40s.
In the mid-40s. Cate, at what age did you come forward and able to reveal this secret that you carried?
55 years old.
55 years old. Joe McGee, at what age were you able to come forward and reveal what Stein had done to you decades before?
50 or 51.
50 or 51. John Murphy, at what age were you and your brothers able to reveal what Abercrombie had done to each of you as kids in the 50s?
We were all in our 40s, late 40s, late 40s.
40s. John and his brothers. And so, there you go.
Jeff, Tony Bobolus from the Denver 7. The Archdiocese here talks a lot about no one has come forward since 2002. There are no recent cases, and their position is that the church has changed, cleaned things up, and much of what you talked about, much of what was in the Attorney General's report, or the Special Master's report, is old news. How do you address that position?
Well, to the assertion by the Catholic bishops that nobody has come forward, or few have come forward more recently, that's somehow evidence that it has changed significantly, and or the practices have somehow changed significantly. The reality is that they have not revealed the histories and the names and those that are known to them, because the law has allowed them to operate in complete secrecy, and the law has allowed them to operate in complete insularity. And so we have no confidence that the practices employed by them, while widely touted, are necessarily any safer. The AG report alone said that they had 100 opportunities to report to law enforcement. And there were 10 that they took. So we have no confidence in their assertion, as bishops have made across this country, where similar statutes of limitations exist as they do in Colorado, that it's any safer today than it was yesterday or decades ago. we have no confidence in that assertion. And when the statute of limitations has opened in other states, as it has in Minnesota, in California, New York, and soon to be in New Jersey, we know offenders get revealed and these dangerous practices get revealed. And we know there's also a massive cleanup of a massive cover-up.
Jeff, this special master's report specifically left religious order priests off limits. Do you think there should be a similar undertaking in Colorado to look at the records of religious order priests?
The special master's report did not reveal the identities of the religious order priests, and indeed, all the religious order priests that have offended children need to be exposed as the 42 identified in the special master report. But the special master report was also deficient to the extent it only revealed 42 and not the religious orders, but it also did not really address the problem that we're really talking here today about. And to the extent it is revelatory, it's helpful, but to the extent it which did not tell the full picture, it did not discuss or reveal any Catholic official by name who was complicit in the crimes described here or in that report. Did not identify one bishop, one vicar general, one chancellor, or one top official who was complicit in these crimes and made the reckless choices, past and present, to protect offenders. And so it's time for those that made the reckless and conscious choices, past and present, to be revealed for the choices they made and we believe are still making.
Why do you believe that was left out of that report, Jeff?
I can't speculate as to why that was not included in the report, but I can say that the extent to which there was a report made is a start. And to that extent, that what brings us here today to bring more light on these dark corners and these dangerous practices.
I'd like to answer that. In my opinion, as hegemony, put the light on the priests and not the bishops that allowed it to happen, and were co-perpetrators.
Would you mind stepping up to the microphone
Yeah.
and making that statement, sir?
I think the reason that the report is insufficient of the Attorney General's special master is because it didn't put the spotlight where it belonged. It diffused it over all the priests. Where it belongs is on the bishop. I want to see a list of all the priests' names and the known perpetrators per bishop who allowed it to happen. And in many cases, it was bishop after bishop after bishop. When you take the White victims or Joe's victims, my perpetrators, my perpetrator went on for years before me and after. He was ordained in 46, and he didn't escape Colorado until in the 60s. But he was molesting the whole time.
Look, it's a lot easier for the Catholic bishops to work with the Attorney General and create this special master to talk about the perpetrators instead of talking about themselves and those with whom they work and those with whom they have served, and to keep the spotlight off the top and put it on somebody else that is either dead and no longer around, and talk more about the past instead of the present, and certainly not identify the top officials.
Sure. Are all these priests that you've identified here ones who simply worked in Colorado, or did they all commit their acts in Colorado?
The priests we've identified here are all priests who have worked in Colorado and at some point in time been accused of childhood sexual abuse and have been accused of childhood sexual abuse. The childhood sexual abuse could have happened outside of the state of Colorado. And we just made the alignment of childhood sexual abuse and having worked in Colorado, because we really want to expose the peril. Because if they committed it someplace else and then have worked in Colorado or are working in Colorado, the peril still exists.
And are these Any new names today, or have they all been identified previously?
No, there are new names here, and Daryl, do you know how many are the new names?
I'll just add real quickly. All names in here have been publicly accused at some point, but never before have they been compiled in something like this, something that the people of Colorado and survivors can look at and rely on, and something they deserve, is to have this kind of list put out on their behalf. It's an effort in transparency, it's an effort in truth, but as far as what they deserve so much more. This is just, a pebble in the ocean of what they deserve in terms of accountability and truth, and we do need more in child protection. This is
Just
an
for
effort in the
clarification, all have not previously been accused in Colorado.
That's correct.
That's correct, yes.
They have not been accused in Colorado. There are some other names and that have not been revealed very widely. And one was Father Delbert Blong. He's now deceased. But the name needs to be revealed because in 1993 I worked with a survivor, and he was a priest in the Diocese of Pueblo. And in 1993, Tom Peril came forward, used his name and went public, and exposed Father Blong, and identified Father Blong as having infected him with AIDS. Tom Peril died in 2014. And at that time, because of the statute of limitations, we were not able to get the history now revealed to us in the AG's report about Father Blong, and that he was known to have been a multiple offender before Tom came forward. And he was forced to make a settlement before he died of AIDS, infected by Father Blong. And so some of the names are known, but never before have been revealed the way we choose to today, because it's time. Thank you all.
Jeff, one more question. It seems like a major part of your presentation today is about changing the laws.
It is.
Colorado's legislature starts in about 2 months. What's your message to Colorado lawmakers?
The only way to keep the kids safe and to protect the kids from further harm and allow the truth to be revealed is to remove the statute of limitations. It's quite simple, and that gives the survivors the chance to reveal and expose the offender in the community and the perils that exist, and those that made the choices to protect them, whether they be schools, whether they be the Catholic bishops, or other institutions and offenders. And it's long past time, and it's time for public policy to not protect the predators and those that choose to protect them, but to protect the kids and those that have been hurt, some of whom stand with us today, and to all the survivors who stand with us today and who have shared their secret and are coming forward as they do. We express deep gratitude for the courage and how hard it is to stand with us today, but how hard it is to suffer daily with these shameful secrets without anything in the law that you can do about it. So thank you all.
I'm sorry, would any of the survivors here today be able to file a lawsuit if the law was changed? They haven't signed agreements or anything that...
Some are coerced into and tricked into agreements, such as Joe McGee, but because they were tricked into that, if the law were to pass, it would open it up for the survivors who were coerced into signing agreements, like Joe McGee for $10,000. They said, well, we're blameless and we didn't know anything about this guy, when they had known he'd spent 18 months in prison, and they had known he admitted to the Catholic bishop that he had could not control himself, and he'd been abusing kids for 3 decades. They knew that. At the time, Joe McGee came forward. Thank you all.
May I ask a question of these survivors? Can I get a show of hands of who read the Special Master's report? Okay. And may I get a show of hands of how many of you recognized your own story from the report? You're shaking your head.
Yeah, I should have been listening to them. They've known about me.
Did you get an opportunity to talk to the investigators?
Yes.
Okay. Why do you think they didn't include your story?
My belief would be that I'm a female. They told me that Father White didn't rape girls.
Well, I represented several, you know,
The dog wasn't.
that's what they told you, huh?
That's what they
Yeah.
told me,
Well,
mediation.
that's-
Don't speak for me.
yeah.
Yep.
So he raped boys and girls and dozens of both. So there you go. Thank you all.
Raise a family dog if you had a chance.